Have you ever had a patient walk in and say, "Hey, I saw this thing on TikTok," and suddenly you're cornered into giving a snap judgment on a diet trend you've never even heard of? Don't worry, you're not alone. I'm Colleen, a PA, dietitian, and your nutrition mentor. Welcome to the Exam Room Nutrition Podcast, your guide to giving better nutrition advice. We've sure been through a lot these last 25 years of nutrition. Do you remember the raw foods diet? Or what about the maple syrup cleanse? How about the feeding tube diet? This was marketed to brides to shed pounds via feeding tubes before their big day. Nuts, right? I'm sure you remember the Special K diet. This is where you ate cereal for breakfast and lunch to drop 2 jean sizes in 2 weeks. Yep, that was a thing. And now we've got the carnivore craze, gut health powders, and influencer-backed supplement stacks that promise more energy, better skin, and perfect poop. If your head is spinning trying to keep up with the latest fads and filter out what's actually worth paying attention to, I've got you, friend. To help us make sense of it all, I'm joined by someone who's spent over 25 years translating nutrition science into real-world advice, from supermarket shelves to public health campaigns. My guest is Leah McGrath. She's a registered dietitian who's made it her mission to bust nutrition myths and bring evidence-based clarity to the chaos of health claims and wellness marketing. Leah's got a fascinating background in both public health and corporate nutrition, and she brings a unique lens to how trends take hold and how clinicians can help patients navigate them. So in this episode, you'll hear why supplement marketing is so powerful and how to spot the red flags when your patient says, "But it's organic." You'll learn a simple reframe that will help you respond when you don't have an answer to your patient's question yet. And you'll learn one outdated grocery store tip that I'm guilty of that might be doing more harm than good. Plus, stick around to the end because I've got 6 nutrition trends we all need to be keeping our eye on. So whether you're navigating nutrition fads in real time or trying to give patients clear, confident advice, you're going to love this episode. So grab your coffee and enjoy my conversation with Leah. Leah, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Colleen. It's really great to interact with you, even if it is just in virtual space, since most of our conversations have been on LinkedIn.
You guys have to come and join the fun on LinkedIn. There are so many great conversations and connections to be made. And so you post a lot about food trends and kind of where nutrition is going. And I think this is a great topic for providers and dietitians to be really aware of. And so I would love to hear what are some of the most surprising or maybe concerning trends that you've seen gain popularity recently.
Yeah, I think first we probably want to back up a little bit and say that there's really a difference between a food fad and a food trend. And what I've always said is like a food fad is something that kind of is like a flash in the pan. You know, it'll be here, it'll be gone. Sometimes it's more about a flavor of a food or just like an individual hot food that's very popular for a short period of time. And then the trend seems to have longer legs and maybe goes across a couple of years or a couple of buying seasons. But in answer to your question, I think one of the ones that probably concerns me the most is the whole carnivore thing, which I remember when that came out, maybe it's probably been a couple of years now. I was like, no, you can't be serious. People are just going to want to eat meat. I mean, that just sounded disgusting to me. And I'm an omnivore. I eat everything, but I really enjoy like being able to eat and giving other people a permission to eat a variety of foods, and just sticking to essentially just one category of food seems incredibly limiting to me and not great for your health.
Oh yeah, this is a big one. And really, it's been around for a while, but thanks to social media and influencers posting their videos of them just like enjoying their strips of steak and eating butter from the stick, it's just bizarre to me also.
No.
But maybe you've seen, are there negative health impacts from this? I know there has been studies with the carnivore diet, so I'm curious what you've seen regarding this trend.
Because I work on my social media platforms with a lot of other dietitians, that has come up several times. And once in a while, I'll even look at Reddit to see what the conversation is. I see a lot of really negative things, like people saying, is it normal that I'm not having a bowel movement for 2 weeks? Is it normal that I've broken out this rash all over my body? I thought this was supposed to be good for me. Is it, all these really horrible negative things? And I'm thinking, yeah, it's because you're on the carnivore diet. So I think, like many things, you're going to be more likely here to hear the success stories, right? Those are what will make the media, like all the people who are like, oh, it's great. All my aches and pains disappeared and I felt better. I lost weight. I had more energy, whatever. But you're not going to hear the bottom tip of the iceberg, which is all those people who had to get off of it because there were so many negative side effects to it. What I hear from dietitians is that increase in kidney stones. I hear about people having much higher cholesterol than going up dramatically in their cholesterol amounts. And everybody's different. I think I should probably qualify that and say people may react to this type of diet very differently. You may have those success stories, and then there may be people, this is not going to work for them. So I don't know that you can put a blanket statement like this isn't going to work for anybody, but I think there's a lot of people out there who are reporting a lot of negative outcomes from that diet.
I'm glad that you clarified the difference between a fad and a trend because, there is that difference. Now, what do you think? Obviously, we talked a little bit about social media, but what do you think drives that rise in food trends? And especially, how can clinicians help our patients navigate it when they do see something online?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Colleen, because, I've been at this for a long time, and it used to be what would drive trends and fads to would be pretty predictable and, would give the clinician more of a lead time. So it might be a diet book, a diet book that came out, and then that author would be making the rounds. And then later it became like cooking shows, like what was on Top Chef or Iron Chef, and in terms of different foods and flavors, that might kind of drive more trends. And so you saw those type of things for quite some time being the drivers of these food fads and dieting trends and food trends. And then we got into the deep, deep darkness of social media, and particularly things like TikTok and Facebook and Instagram, where the time for a clinician to realize that that was out there and react to it and kind of formulate some sort of intelligent, well-reasoned, well-evidenced response went from, a month or 2 months or 6 months to 24 hours. That's how fast the cycle is now, and maybe even faster. So that really puts the clinician at a distinct disadvantage because you may have people walking into your clinic or into your office, and they'll be like, I saw this on TikTok as I was waiting in the waiting room. What do you think about that? So I feel bad for clinicians because you have almost no time at all to figure out what's happened here. What are they talking about? What should you be reacting to or not reacting to? Where's the proof? Where's the evidence? So yeah, the clock has accelerated a lot on that whole conversation.
That is such a great point. And as a clinician, it's really stressful when a patient comes to you literally with that exact scenario, and you might have not even heard of it. You haven't had time to dig into the research because we are evidence-based. And so in order to formulate an appropriate response, you do have to look at the literature. It might be something great, unlikely, but I talk about this all the time of how clinicians are cornered into giving like a yes or no answer or a stamp of approval or denial answer on things. And I encourage clinicians to not feel that burden to give a direct answer to the patient if you aren't fully confident in your answer. So I always encourage them to say, hey, you know what? I haven't heard of this yet. Give me a few days to look into the studies or to look into the source or to look this up so I can give you the best response. And I think that's a great way to handle all these rapidly changing food trends.
I think you're right on the money, Colleen.
And it's unfortunate because we are competing against influencers with no
Yeah,
credentials, with a very
right.
loud voice, a big following. And I've got plenty of friends on Instagram who are nutrition researchers, PhDs, and who focus primarily on nutrition misinformation online. And it's fascinating. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying this episode and want to stay in the loop on all things nutrition, I've got a weekly newsletter you will love. It's packed with quick tips, hot topics, and practical takeaways to help you give better nutrition advice, and it's completely free. You can sign up at examroomnutrition.com/sign up. And so one thing that you guys can do if your patient really wants an answer or you just want to give them something that's helpful is ask them, who did you hear that from? And, if they can maybe
Yes.
pull that account up on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, and you can do a quick check. Now, of course, there are inappropriate and inaccurate recommendations from doctors, from dietitians. Like, I've seen it all out there, right? However, you can look for credentials. Generally, if it's a registered dietitian or a PhD in nutrition, those are pretty credible nutrition sources. Again, I say that with a caveat because you're going to
Yes,
get the
yes.
outliers and people who spew all kinds of craziness. But if someone doesn't have any kind of higher advanced degree, I would really proceed with caution. All right, so I want to move and shift a little bit away, although it still falls under this trend. I would love for your thoughts and to talk about how supplements are marketed as essential, right, for optimal health. And they use all these fancy buzzwords. But I would love to hear what are some of the common misconceptions that patients have because of the marketing about supplements' necessity in their daily routine.
Yeah, I'm reading a really interesting book, and I know we talked about it a little bit on LinkedIn. Zach Frolak, I think that's how you say his name, his book on nutrition labeling. And I have a bunch of different books I've read on this topic of like, at what point did we as Americans become so attached to taking supplements? I mean, even more so than eating foods to get nutrients. So I think that there's an idea, and it'd be interesting to find out where it came from, is that supplements are just a good idea across the board. And, just in case mentality, just in case you're not getting enough calcium, just in case you're not getting enough vitamin D from being outside, or your body isn't making vitamin D. It's that just in case. And a lot of people have the idea that, number one, it's not going to hurt you. So why not? That's, I think, the number one thing. They're sold in a pharmacy or online or in a supermarket. So it's not like you're buying it from a shady guy in the street or like a roadside market. So these are all legitimate, safe things to take. And I think also within that, some people have the idea more is better. Like, if they say I should take 200 milligrams of calcium, why not take 600? Why not take 1,000? So to people, I would say that vitamin mineral supplements and herbal supplements can act just like drugs in your body, meaning they can have side effects. They can interact with prescription medication that your provider, your clinician has prescribed to you. So you do need to make sure that your pharmacist, your physician, your doctor's office, whatever, is aware that you're taking supplements, because there can be some really negative outcomes for that. If you were having surgery, you'd have to tell your anesthesiologist, your surgeon, what you're taking. There is also that idea that all supplements are kind of equally good. You can take everything. You do want to look for that third-party verification to at least make sure that what they say on the labels in the supplement is actually in the supplement. There are lots of cases where supplements don't even have what they claim to have on the label. So you look for that third-party certification, which is the USP certification on supplements. And then, before you start taking supplements, look at your diet. Can you eat the foods that will give you that amount of vitamin minerals? Supplements should not be the first line of defense. It should be what you're eating and your dietary intake. And if for whatever reason you can't meet that, say, you're pregnant, you're breastfeeding, you've got celiac disease or some sort of like autoimmune condition, there are conditions where you need supplements, but not all of us need supplements, and we certainly don't need as many as most of us in the United States are taking.
It's a fascinating discussion. And I
Oh,
think
yeah.
you're right. Patients do have that mindset of like, well, it can't hurt. And it
Right.
will, just like you said, like fill in the gaps, or which in some cases, like you mentioned at the end brilliantly, it might be true. But this is where that personalized nutrition approach is really, really important, because you're right. There are side effects. They do interact with certain medications. And I actually did an entire episode on this, episode 75, titled, Are Your Patients Taking Too Many Supplements and Don't Even Know It? And some patients might not realize that you prescribe them to go on calcium, maybe because of osteoporosis, but they're also taking a multivitamin and a greens smoothie that also has calcium in it, right? And they, as the lay person, they're not aware of that. And so that's our jobs. So that episode, we really dig into conversations in really finding out which supplements your patients are taking, and even which words you can use, because they might not think that greens powder is, quote, a supplement, when in fact it is. So go check out that episode after you listen to this one, and I'll link down to it in the show notes below. Now, let's stick with this conversation of supplements, because it's such a big topic. And I've actually talked a lot about supplements lately on the podcast. But I wanted to linger on what you had just ended with, that there are some patients who really do need supplements. But I'm curious as to if you can kind of help my listeners differentiate between those that they should be considering and those who might just be like completely thrown off by the marketing hype of it.
Yeah, as I mentioned, somebody like celiac disease is a really good example of somebody who has maybe a very limited diet of some of the whole grains, whole wheats. So they might be missing out some on those B vitamins and might be missing out on iron, on zinc. I mean, at one time I remember talking to a woman, and she was a vegetarian with celiac disease. And because of her celiac disease, she also had issues. She was avoiding lactose milk because that was at her celiac disease had aggravated that. So she was a vegetarian, not eating any whole grains, whole wheat, and she was avoiding dairy. And so she had osteoporosis. So she had a wealth of things going on. There's somebody that the clinician would look at or should look at and say, this is a person who, not just based on their personal recall and their medical history, but hopefully also on lab tests, really needs to have a supplement to bring them up to where they need to be. Because once you start to get into that like insufficiency and deficiency space, vitamin and minerals, you start to have additional problems because of that. So you do need to bring somebody back up and also work with them on where they can get those vitamins and minerals in their diet and or with supplements.
Oh, what a great example. I mean, poor woman. Hopefully she was able to work with an excellent clinician who did give her some support with that, because I'm sure she felt just awful. And she probably was
Yeah.
thinking that she's following the diet appropriately, right? Gluten-free, vegetarians, lots of fruits and veggies and fiber. I
Mhm.
mean, that's a great example of that. And so if you're looking at any patient who's maybe has any malabsorption, obviously bariatric surgical patients, but any Crohn's, colitis, like anything that's disrupting their microbiome or their ability to absorb nutrients, that would really put that alarm signal on for me that maybe you should do some labs and look into it and have that conversation about what their diet looks like. Okay, so I want to move on to something that we call, quote, functional foods. And this is sort of becoming a hot topic, especially today in the realm of gut health. And everybody's sort of obsessed with this terminology and their gut. Now, are these claims that are on these products, and you can give a few examples if you have them, are they grounded in science to improve our immunity and gut health and skin and all of that?
Yeah, what's interesting about a lot of that is the FDA does regulate some of those types of claims. So you notice products have to be a little careful about how they phrase things like that. And so there'll be a lot of like may support kind of language if you see it on a label. You're right. Gut health is one of the new hot fads or trends that we're seeing on products. And there are, of course, others as well. But what I normally say to people is realize that the front of the package, right now anyway, the front of package is really a marketing space. It's like a billboard for a company. So the company, the food company, can put a lot of different things on there as long as they're fairly careful about some of the wording on there and even on the back of the back label. But that is really marketing. It's to catch your eye, whether there's a protein in 18 font and everything else is in 12 font, or it's gut health or immune function or something like that. So you always want to be a little skeptical about claims like that on the front of the package, which really amount to little more than marketing. And then if you do see that, and gut health is obviously a big buzz topic right now, think about what are they putting in that product that supposedly helps gut health. Now, for example, one of the things that I see quite a bit is inulin or chicory root. And I'm sure you're familiar with that, Colleen. It's a prebiotic and that gets a lot of buzz for gut health benefits. But for some people, what can help one person could be a nightmare situation for somebody else who might have FODMAP issues with those mentable oligosaccharides and things. And inulin could leave them doubled over and in pain. So that's not a gut health benefit. That would be like a gut health nightmare for them. So I would just tell people, first of all, think, is this marketing? Turn it over, look at the ingredients and see what's in the list of ingredients. Because the list of ingredients, the nutrition facts panel, that's like the facts, right? The other stuff is mostly going to be marketing and information to try and get you to buy something.
Well, that's why the font is so tiny on the nutrition facts label. I mean, sometimes you need to have
Right.
like a magnifying glass to read everything.
Right.
And you're right, it is so much marketing on the front, but it also is an interesting space because at least at the time of the recording, they might be moving to a front of label nutrition facts label, which it will be interesting to see how that pans out. Now, I am a firm believer in a food first approach, as are most dietitians, and I would hope most of my listeners are as well. And so, how can we, as the clinician, if we're sitting across from a patient and they're like, hey, doc, I'm thinking about taking, a multivitamin D and some extra vitamin C because it's flu season. Like, what do you think? Where should we, as the provider, direct that conversation to, of course, number one, encourage a food first approach and then decide if they should, take those supplements that they're considering?
Yeah, I mean, it would be awesome if the clinician, the provider said, hey, let me give you a number for a dietitian or something so you can talk to them about how your diet, you probably have enough in your diet or had information they could give to them. I mean, given how much time clinicians have with a patient, I think that's a tough thing to do, is to have basically what amounts to a nutrition consultation, because you have to then ask those questions. Well, okay, you want to take a vitamin C? Well, tell me a little bit about what you're currently eating. So do we get into a 3-day food recall, food frequency questionnaire? So I think that gets really tricky. I'm sure what a lot of clinicians think and probably do is it probably wouldn't hurt you if you want to take a multivitamin that has vitamin C. Just pick ones that don't have more than 100% of the recommended daily intake and you'll be fine. As long as there's nothing else that's going to, interact with their multivitamin, they're not taking anything with extreme amounts, they'll probably be fine. And I would imagine that's what a lot of clinicians do. But I mean, in a perfect world, it would be that, well, let's see if you really need to take it. And, all you need to do is eat a couple of oranges a day or have a salad, one day, a couple of days a week, and you'll be getting enough vitamin C. And I think that's a tough one because I've never sat in that position in a clinic. And though I know how little time people have sometimes.
Yeah, it's really, really tough. And this is literally why I created this podcast, was because I feel the burden as the provider. I have the knowledge as the dietitian, but I don't have the time in clinic to do all the things that I truly believe that the patient deserves. And so we are sitting in this tricky spot that we have to sort of ebb and flow back and forth between giving a sufficient answer so our patients come back and customer service, right? And also to combat misinformation, but also not just skipping over it. And like you said, yeah, sure, it's fine. It might be fine, multivitamin, no problem. Where for that one patient out of, 500 might not be fine. So I actually love your answer of refer to a dietitian, because that is a very big purpose of my podcast, is to promote dietitians as the nutrition experts, because you do need to sit with a patient for 45 minutes and talk about what foods they're eating and really get a look at, okay, maybe they're not deficient in vitamin C, but zinc is a problem. And you as a clinician, most of us are not trained in knowing, which foods have which vitamins and minerals, especially the weird ones, that you don't always hear about. So I think a referral to a dietitian in that answer is brilliant and is the perfect answer for that question. Okay, so I think it's fascinating how you've worked in public health and as a supermarket dietitian, because I don't believe there are a lot of you out there. So I'm just really curious to hear what strategies have worked best for you, especially maybe in that space in combating food misinformation.
Yeah, so I'm not sure the exact number of supermarket dietitians now. There used to be like about 1,000, but when I started out 25 years ago, there were just a handful of us. Supermarket dietitians work in different ways. Like some do work like individually in the store, some do telehealth and MNT, medical nutrition therapy. Some get referrals from doctors' offices or clinics. I work at more of the corporate level, so most of my work is around doing writing, and I host a radio program, and I answer customer questions online. So mine is more of a big picture kind of stuff rather than like a person to person. It's more of on a population level. So I feel like the more positive responses I've gotten back was when I've written articles debunking or addressing some misinformation. Like, when people say, and sometimes the reactions are not good. People sometimes don't want to hear that. They don't want you to tell them that they've been bought. One time I remember I was at a function and a guy said, "Oh, I read your article about organic foods and that organic growers do use pesticides." And he said, "Why have I been buying organic foods for years if the farmers use pesticide?" I'm like, "I can't answer that for you. If that's the only reason that you buy organic, then I'm sorry, but that's the truth of the situation." So sometimes people don't want to hear that. But I do get some positive responses back, and people know that I try and stick with the science and give them the best available resources. And I'm not trying to sell them a particular food or a particular label. And I think that they know that.
I think that's a really unique part of your job, and really most dietitians in general, is that most of us, again, I don't like using blanket statements, but a majority of dietitians are not trying to sell a product, a supplement. And I think that's a really telltale sign that we're just spreading facts, information, so that the consumer can make the best choice for them, as opposed to marketers who are like, oh, don't eat XYZ food. That's toxic. Come and buy my product and it'll solve all your
Right.
problems. Right.
Right.
I think that's a really interesting point that you ended with, is like, that is your goal, is to just share information, because I think information is what we need. Now, I don't think a lot of people knew that dietitians actually work in supermarkets. That's a pretty fascinating area to work in. So I'm
Yeah.
glad that you shared kind of what that looks like. And I wanted to touch on something just in the last few minutes that we have, that we actually talked about on a phone call a few weeks ago. And that is sort of how we teach people to shop. And we chuckled because I believe both you and I were taught, and we taught patients, I'm sure, to shop the perimeter. That was kind of like, I said that all the time to patients. And so I'm curious is what your opinion is on that. If maybe a provider is giving some shopping tips to a patient, And if you don't like that, how else would you suggest for them to educate patients regarding shopping?
Yeah, you're right. I think that's something that was like one of those like fast, easy food rules that were really popular probably in the early 2000s, early mid 2000s. And as a supermarket dietitian, I started thinking, well, gosh, in the perimeter of our stores, we have like donuts and beer and wine, and we've got bacon, and then in the middle of the store, there's like frozen fruits and vegetables, and we've got dried beans and canned beans. And what's wrong with those items? But I think falling into these sort of like one off statements like shop the perimeter, or don't eat anything with more than 5 ingredients, or don't eat anything your grandmother wouldn't recognize as food. These are all examples of Michael Pollan's great food rules. And I'm saying that great, like tongue in cheek. And people say to me, oh, well, nobody really takes that, literally. I'm like, oh, but yes, they do take that literally. So I think as clinicians, people need to be aware that if you use little statements like that, that people are going to take you very literally sometimes. So you really have to be careful with that. I mean, I don't think a patient is going to come to you and say, how should I shop the grocery store, or how should I shop the supermarket? I think the patient's going to come to you and say, I want to make sure I'm eating healthy. What advice would you give me? And I think there I would say, make sure you're eating fruits and vegetables. Make sure you're eating a variety of food. Make sure that you're not eating a lot of fast food. But I mean, if you had to say nothing else as a clinician, I would say eat your fruits and vegetables. I mean, that's like you can almost not go wrong with that with anybody. So that's if you were looking for just a blanket statement, get those 5 a day. That's an older message, still accurate. Eat your 2 fruits, 3 vegetables a day. Start there.
Perfect advice. Yes, I couldn't agree more with you. And I talk about fruits and veggies all the time with kids. For the rest of their life, they're going to be hearing this message, but we need to continue to remind people that there are so many benefits to fruits and veggies. So I love that response. Leah, thank you so much for coming on and just unpacking food trends and how we can educate our patients better. So I'd love for you to share with my audience where they can connect with you and learn more about you.
Yeah, as Colleen and I connected on LinkedIn, I'm definitely on LinkedIn as Leah McGrath. I do work with a big platform of other dietitians called Build Up Dietitians. That's also on Blue Sky and Substack. And Build Up Dietitians has 2 weekly newsletters that are on Substack.
And I will link to all of those. So if you want to join her community and just get her incredible newsletters, you can do so in the links down below in the show notes. Leah, thank you so much for the gift of your time. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Colleen.
All right, before we go, let's wrap up with my nutrition notes. Now, I thought it would be fun to share a few emerging trends that I've been keeping an eye on. Now, as a society, we are continually interested in eco-friendly and sustainable products. And let's be honest, protein continues to be the star nutrient that everyone's talking about. But you might not have heard of these. So first up, tea is having a moment. Chai, Earl Grey, and London Fog aren't just for your mug anymore. They're showing up in desserts, granolas, and even sparkling drinks. There's also innovation in how it's made. Think tea strips, cold brew bags, and powder mixes designed for water bottles. And with vintage-inspired tea parties making a comeback, tea might just become the new happy hour, especially with their added adaptogens and wellness claims. Number 2, plant-based deli meat is on the rise. Now, while plant-based burgers might be losing steam, plant-based lunch meats and charcuterie-style slices are gaining traction. This is especially among shoppers who are already used to paying more for quality deli options. These new products are often minimally processed and made with umami-rich ingredients like koji, a Japanese fermented rice known for its deep flavor. Number 3, smaller bites, but more nutrients. GLP-1 medications are reshaping how people eat. So there's a growing demand for meals and snacks that are nutrient-dense but portion-controlled. These smaller servings are packed with protein, fiber, and essential nutrients, and they're influencing everything from meal prep habits to household grocery choices. Number 4, brain health is trending. And I am not mad about it. Whether it's preventing cognitive decline or simply boosting focus and clarity, brain supportive foods and habits are top of mind for a lot of families. You can expect to see more attention on high protein, brain boosting snacks and lifestyle routines designed to keep people sharp well into the future. If you're interested in cognitive health, go check out episode 80 titled The Mind Diet, What to Eat for Brain Health, where we unpack a science-backed approach to eating that is showing incredible promise for supporting memory, focus, and overall cognitive health. Number 5, hydration is getting fancy. Plain water isn't cutting it anymore. Functional beverages that are infused with electrolytes, antioxidants, and vitamins are flooding the market. From cactus water to sparkling sips with bold global flavors, hydration has officially leveled up. And lastly, number 6, crunch is king. Texture is stealing the spotlight. Think of roasted chickpeas, mushroom chips, dehydrated fruits, and chili crisps are showing up in everything from salads to snacks. Even drinks and desserts are getting in on the action. Now, for your most selective eaters, these crunchy changes might just be the texture twist they need. So whether these trends end up in your clinic conversations or on your own shopping cart, now you'll be ahead of the curve. Thanks for joining me today. And as always, let's continue to make our patients healthier, one exam room at a time. I'll see you next time.